All right. Hello, welcome to this video. Thanks for tuning in, sharing this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos, welcome. Welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness and the highest levels of love light. I just want to go into a little energy update, a little share about some synchronicities that I've had this week, and we'll go from there. So thanks for tuning in. The first thing I wanted to share is just a recap of the energies this week. We had the eclipse, we had the new moon yesterday. This whole week has been an opportunity from my perspective to see whatever it is that's out of alignment and for us to move through it from a different angle. So I was called to look at a lot of different things I was experiencing from different perspectives and different points of views. And the question became, are you, oops, I think I'm frozen here. Are you frozen? Are you going to respond to these particular circumstances the same way that you've responded to them before? And there were several circumstances that I did respond to them very much like I would have responded to them years ago. And then I caught myself after the fact going, wow, that was an opportunity for me to let go of resistance, to step out of an old habit pattern, and I missed it. However, the ironic part about it was as soon as I made that realization, I was gifted another opportunity, which these opportunities do not always feel fun, and they do not always feel like opportunities. If we are in a relationship, for example, with our partner or spouse, and I'm going to use this as an example, and you've had an argument going for years about a certain subject matter, whether it be parenting your kids or what you're spending money on or whatever it might be. In a relationship, speaking from experience, we're called to continuously work at it and not necessarily continuously stay in the same patterns. That can be really challenging when we're trying to express our own unique individuality, yet at the same time live under the same roof as another person, whether it be children or parents or spouses, it doesn't matter. What I'm speaking to is specifically relationships. So part of what came up for me this week was I had been looking for validation, or perhaps my ego was looking for validation at certain times. Guys, sometimes when we're going through, let me just pause for just a moment. Sometimes when we're going through certain things, what seems like, let me just go backwards for a moment, because another one of the synchronicities that came up from me this week was the subject matter of feeling alone. There's so many of us who are on this path, and it can feel very lonely at times because nobody else is experiencing the things that we are. And we want other people to understand what we're going through. But realistically, they may never understand what we're going through. And the question becomes, why are we continually expecting them to understand when in actuality, it's not their responsibility to understand our plight, if you will. And so we are being invited to ask ourselves in some of these cases, what is it that needs to be understood? Who is it that needs to be understood? And once we kind of dig a little deeper, sometimes we might begin to recognize sometimes we just have to do this on our own. Whether we have friends or we have a spouse is irrelevant. It's helpful. I shouldn't say it's irrelevant. what would be better said is it's helpful to have that, but that doesn't mean that we're always going to be understood. And I'm laughing because right before I got on here, the card that I pulled, which I pull quite frequently from the Starseed Oracle deck, it says, "You're not for everyone," because we're not. We might have some insights or a gift that we'd like to share with others, but that doesn't mean those others are going to get it. And it's not their responsibility to get us. It's our responsibility to get ourselves. And this is kind of the message that I wanted to share. This is kind of the general message across the board, is it comes back to us being responsible and holding our responsibility for ourselves. Not needing others to support us, not needing others to back us, to have our back. Now, I want to go backwards on that and say, I am so grateful because I do have people that have my back. I do have a spouse who's very understanding, and we have worked through a lot together that has made us even more strongly bonded and connected. But that doesn't mean that's always the way it is or always the way that it feels when we're going through it. I had some sessions this week with late workers who really feel alone and lost. All ages, you guys. I work with clients who are in their 80s and 90s, 80s, late 80s, all the way down to teenagers. And parents who have young kids. And I work kind of in the energy field of the kids through the parents. My point is that across the board, one of the common themes is a feeling of isolation, because we feel perhaps like an outcast, or that others don't understand what we're going through. And even though I started this channel a while ago so that people wouldn't feel that they were the only ones going through it, I also have to share that we are the only ones going through it from another perspective. No one else is going through what I'm going through in my way, because I am going through it in my way. Otherwise, we would all be going through it at the same time, in the same way, having the same experiences and the same relationships. And that would take away from this unique diversity. And so that can be challenging at times. So this is, you're not for everyone. Embrace your weirdness. Face your true north. And I feel like this week I was really called to face my true north. And in doing that, the question becomes, where's north? What do they mean by true north? What is my true north? And it isn't the direction that someone else has pointed me towards, or the direction that I have pointed myself towards, because that person that may have pointed me in that direction is no longer who I am standing here right now. Does that make sense? So I really was in a pickle this week, a little bit of a uncomfortable space of resistance. And let me just go into that a little bit deeper. Resistance doesn't always have to look like we're fighting something. Resistance can be our true north. Resistance can be us expecting someone else to understand us and never getting that validation. All right. And even, guys, I have an amazing support group. I really do. And I'm so grateful for my best friends and my family and my spouse. My husband's amazing. But that, again, I'm going to go backwards for a moment. That doesn't mean I always feel supported. Sometimes we feel like we're not supported by the universe, but we are. Because what it comes down to is I have to feel that within my own being, within my own self. If someone's going through depression, For example, we know if we've ever gone through depression that it's helpful to have someone else to tell us maybe what we need to hear or to help lift us up. But the only person who really can do that for us is us. And this is all about us taking responsibility for ourselves. And until we do that, then I think Andrew Bartzis calls it avoidance of responsibility. When I say that, I see us dancing around it. Ooh, I'm not ready to look at that yet. I'm not ready to take that on for myself, because sometimes it feels isolated and lonely to be connecting with people who've gone to the other side and having other people go, that's weird. Or to have dreams that come true. Or to have memories of being on a spaceship and have people go, okay, that's a little weird. I could go on and on. There's an infinite number of weird possibilities of whatever our truth is individually. I see people who go, I thought that person was my friend. They just don't get me. They don't have to get you. It's disappointing sometimes if people don't get us, especially to the human ego. That was another theme that came up. And there's nothing wrong with the ego, you guys. It's part of our system to help us differentiate between all the possibilities, differentiate between who we are really, and of all the possibilities. So the theme besides that was disappointment. I had several sessions where I worked with others who were disappointed in someone else. They let them down. They weren't included. You guys, that's something we all go through, of course. Even the most popular, I'm taking high school as an example. I've really watched a lot of, social bubbles kind of play out in my reality that all kind of reminded me of high school. But there are certain, we'll say, clicks that click into place and then they hover together because birds of a feather feel better when they're together, because they walk alike and they talk alike and they feel accepted by their tribe. And that's a beautiful thing. But there are going to be times in our life, especially if we're a bridge, which we are, many of us are bridging together the 3 to 5D. And I don't even like to say that because we're bridging together so much more than that. We have a tendency in a linear perspective to see things as 3D, 4D, 5D. 6D and beyond is inaccessible because of X, Y, and Z. I don't buy into any of it. I buy into all of it. I value what feels right for me. But anyways, so we're bridging together these multidimensional realities, but we're here now in a skin suit that is required to buy groceries or farm, if that's your thing, drive a car, put gas in our car, or maybe plug it into an electrical outlet. You see where I'm going with this? We still have things that we are required to do as a human that are part of a 3D or 4D experience. So we can't exactly skip over it all. Some people might live on a mountaintop and farm and they've already become self-sustainable. That's awesome. But not all of us are there, and not all of us are necessarily, I'm hearing some people are purposefully not there so that they can help their brothers and sisters who are not there in their own way. And so oftentimes we find ourselves wanting to be on that mountaintop, yet trudging through our everyday lives at certain moments in our lives when it feels really 3D or heavy or whatever we want to label it as. But that's part of the journey. And so sometimes we become disillusioned, disappointed, not only with others and our expectations of perhaps what we feel they should think of us, or our expectations of what we feel they should be thinking in general. And it comes back to the word expectation. It's not necessarily realistic. And so we're really being called to look at things from a different angle and look at things from a different perspective. And this week was a really great opportunity for us to reset our buttons, to reset the buttons, that things that push our buttons, to recognize when our buttons are being pushed, and to recognize where we're in resistance, not avoiding the knowingness that that is something that might trigger us. Feeling isolated or alone can sometimes seem overwhelming. But once we get into that space of, what's that song? I always sing it. Ain't nothing gonna break my stride. Ain't nothing gonna slow me down. Oh no, I've got to keep on moving. It's like drag, right? I went for a bike ride this weekend with my husband, and it was funny because another person got right behind me, and I was like, "Oh, that's that right? They're in my wind. I'm blocking the wind so that they can go a little faster. There's not as much drag for that person behind me on the bike, right? I'm not like one of those speedy bike riders, but you get where I'm going with this. What is it that?" And then it came a point where they had to pass me. I helped them to a certain point, and then it was time to go around. So some of those things, that's an example, I'm using it as a metaphor, that we thought were helping us, it might be friendships, relationships, looking for validation, sometimes can give us a better range of motion, but other times it's actually putting us into a place of resistance. So I was really called to go to that space with myself this week. And it wasn't easy, you guys. It's definitely, for me, was a challenge. And I felt highly uncomfortable during certain times this week where I was feeling all of it come up all at once, for me to look directly in the face of whatever it was that was coming up for me. And there were a lot of things, but this was an example. Resistance to this card, resistance to not being for everyone. Also, facing my true north. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because there's a lot of people who are recognizing that there's more to their package. Maybe it's a gift that they've now recently discovered that could make them a little weird. It could make people not like them because they're able to see things that these others cannot see. You guys, that's something that we all experience in this particular community, I think, at one time or another, right? Sometimes it's not that people are judging us. Sometimes it's that we are judging ourselves, and the other people that are judging us is merely a reflection of us judging ourselves. Us not being accepted by someone else is us not accepting our true north, whatever that is. And that'll show up for us in relationships and conversation and opportunities to recognize those buttons and essentially move through them, right? And I'm hearing first is disassociation, not disassociating ourselves from this bridge and just jumping out of the soup because it gets too hot. sometimes we're required to alchemize those energies in a different way, and not bypass would be one word, but disassociate might be a better word. I'm hearing dis our associates who we're associating with. That is something that I've seen in the spiritual community, and this has happened to me and to some of my friends in the past of, well, I'm not going to associate with that person anymore because of whatever that might be. And that might be a requirement. It might be that that person is not necessarily part of our journey anymore. And that's okay. That's a whole other video. But part of this is rediscovering who we really are and what really makes us tick, so to speak. So what makes, I'm hearing it, tick tock, playing with time. What makes us enjoy the time that we have here now on Earth? And I was called to recognize that it's not about other people, although it's very much about other people. So our relationships and who we spend our time with is valuable because it does make life that much more sweet. But at the same time, if we can't stand being around ourselves, or we're expecting someone else to complete us or to fulfill us or to fulfill an expectation that is not part of a shared reality, then that is perhaps disassociation, or that takes us into something that isn't real. It can be challenging, guys, to be a multidimensional being and still stay in this body and stay grounded and recognize I'm being called to talk about this. Some people are remembering past lives, and this past life might have involved a friend, and we recognize I knew you in a past life. That doesn't necessarily mean that that friend is who they were in relationship to who they were or we were in the previous lifetime. So that doesn't mean, for example, just because you were married to that person in the past life, that doesn't mean you're going to be married to that person in this lifetime. And I see that being a challenge for some people to navigate. Now, I'm using this as an example because it's not just about a past lifetime. It could be, for example, a relationship that ended because there was lack of communication. And fast forward a year later, and that person's having regrets and saying, well, it should have worked out this way, but it didn't, right? So again, we're being called to be really present with who we are now. And if that person's in a new relationship with someone else, that's their reality that they're in now, and you may not be part of it. We have this opportunity to recognize that and not carry that with us into this new lifetime that we're being gifted moment to moment. And that's part of what this eclipse and new moon are all about. That would be a form of drag. It would be a form of resistance. It would be a form of disassociation. And it's something that we're all being invited to look at in our lives. Where are we hanging on to something that isn't? Now we could play with that and say, well, we're multidimensional beings, and so time doesn't exist, and therefore it is, because it was. And that's where we're called to rein it in, because that pulls us in a schism or a split. And that's where I'm being called to talk about several synchronicities. Whew. when I'm in flow, I call it, when I'm in that space of just being in that space of presence or messages coming in, and there's different layers of that. One of the challenges for me has been to rein it in and recognize that I am a human, even though I have memories of me being blue on another planet. That's not who I am now. But it is, because I still have that in my DNA, right? From one perspective. Or recognizing that having the memories of being a shaman in a past life. I remember being with my tribe of Aborigines. That doesn't mean I'm living right now in Australia, right? By Uluru, although I can still connect with that very strongly. How do we navigate being here, yet having the access to there? And how do we use take our responsibility and recognize that that's our journey, and that's not necessarily the responsibility of other people to understand that about us, or even the tribal members. Like, they don't know who I am necessarily. So we're being called not to project that onto somebody else. I'm hearing that. What's that? Don't you know who I am? Do you know who you are? Do we know who we are? That's what it's all about. I could go into so many different angles. So when I work with someone who is perhaps schismed or in different places, sometimes it looks like being in a hallway with a lot of tunnels. And I'll see multiple versions of that person. I just did a reading this week with someone who was going through, and I'm so grateful for them allowing me to use this as an example to share with others, because I think it could be helpful for other people. And they were really going through some serious depression, and they struggle with intense ADHD, and they struggle with, I didn't know anything about their history, and I went into just a little reading, and I'm going to show what I drew. And what I saw was, you can see that, I saw them here, and I saw them here, and I saw them here. And each of these rings represents a different timeline. And so then I was shown, and I don't usually draw out what I see, but I was guided to draw it out for them. And I drew this timeline, and it was all gnarly. It was all gnarly and tangled up. And I saw them literally stuck in each of these gnarled up webs of identity and memory. And each of those versions of them in this almost look like an umbilical tentacles, all in this gnarled soup. And I saw part of this person in one section and part of this person in another section. And each of those rings represented a period of time in their life. And those each represented, so if I draw this out a little bit, this was, and then I was shown them in the center, right? So this is them, but this is another version of them, this is another version of them. And I was shown that each of these, so I whack myself, each of these timelines, like this, and then over here, is also connected to a web. This timeline is connected to this, and each of these bubbles holds a memory, if that makes sense. And each of those bubbles holds a memory, such as anger, sadness, right? Whatever it might be. Happiness doesn't always have to be negative. But they we're being called to bring that all back into the original center point, the centripetal force, centripetal, however you pronounce it. I make up my own words all the time. I carries over into my regular English language. But essentially, I'm tying this all back in because sometimes we can feel like we're 10 different people. And the more multidimensional we become, the more important it is for us to stabilize ourselves in this timeline. Now, I say timeline, and I'm not in this video intending to get into, well, I thought we were on one timeline. Are we on multiple timelines? How do I know what timeline I'm on? I'm just using that as an example in this reality now. Getting up, having my coffee, going for a walk, speaking with my husband, talking with my family. That's who I am right now in this time, right? So when we tune into all these different variations of us, it can be very overwhelming. So we really have to get grounded, check in with our bodies, and not be up here so much. So when I talk with this person about that, I recognize why they're so all over the place. So each of these memories that they had, one happened at 10 years old, for example, one happened at 15, one happened again at 15. Each of those is a split, buddy, and each of those is taking away from the wholeness that is now. So therefore, what happens is it creates this inability to utilize all of that and bring it all in, hug it all together, hug it out, and bring it all back into the heart so that all of those different times that hold together, awesome. So I kind of had a little distraction there just for a moment, but essentially we're being called to call back these remnants of ourselves. And as I share that, it's these remaining particles, and I'm hearing particle acceleration. As we accelerate, these pieces that we've kind of, that we haven't healed or brought back into wholeness, or sometimes we don't even need to, we can just recognize that those are patterns or those memories. It's basically attached to a memory bank. And that banking system is what holds us in a certain trajectory or pattern. It's like pattern recognition. We start to build our habits around these patterns of who we think we are or who we thought we were, or certain, these remnants, they hang out in our field, and then we're pulled in these different directions like little strings, right? I have to sneeze. And they take our attention and our energy, or they don't necessarily even take our attention, but they do require a certain amount of energy to hang on to, or it looks sometimes energetically like that person is stuck in that field. There's an essence or an element of us that's still stuck in. You guys ever seen Napoleon Dynamite? Reminds me of Uncle Rico, right? Oh, if they would have just, the coach would have just put me in 1982, we would have won that championship. And he's just like living in the past. And because of it, that's what it is. But some people aren't even aware that they're doing that. And they're not aware that those pieces of them are still accessible to be healed and to be made whole once again. And so that does require acknowledging, or sometimes it requires work, but sometimes it just requires us to acknowledge that those are times in our life that made a huge impact. They had a ripple effect, so it rippled out, and We're still connected to it. So until we can heal those parts of us, that will create an imbalance mentally, emotionally, physically. And so oftentimes I will work with someone and I'll have questions that I'm guided to ask that help that person to remember what it is that maybe they're avoiding. It's not always sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes it's not that at all. Sometimes it's just us. It's as simple as us going to a waterfall or a river and allowing that water to just wash us completely pure and clean energetically of any of those memories that are no longer necessary for our growth and expansion. And if we can give ourselves permission to truly do that, there's a couple of, you could do affirmations. I'm just sharing, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But that's something that's really big right now. That's a part of the reason there's so many people who are angry and they don't know why. They're triggered and they don't know why. They're not recognizing that and by the way, that's not the only reason, because someone's had something traumatic happen in their life. That's why they're angry. That's not the only reason. It can be that it's pulling our energies all over the place. So we're being called to call back that energy, call back the power we've given away to those moments in time, call back the energy that we've given away to those people who may have traumatized us. That can be emotionally, physically, all of the above. And take those into accountability, bringing that accountability back to us and recognizing that we don't need to give that power away to that person who did that thing to us anymore. And that can be challenging for some people. But that's where a lot of light workers are being called to assist with that, right? And this could just be our parents telling us that we weren't the favorite kid, or our parents saying, your brother's my favorite. I never wanted you. I mean, I could go on and on. What is it? So ask ourselves these questions. When did this begin for me? Where do I feel pulled and split? And recognize that that's not real. Yes, I know when we're in it, it feels very real. But that's part of the work that I've had to do over the past 10 years, approximately, my whole life really, but was call back those parts, those memories. Sometimes when we have these deep activations, we'll have memories that come up that are cellular memories that might cause us to cry for no reason. Obviously or to clear or purge that emotion that we've been holding in our cellular makeup. It's okay. And we don't always have to know why. But trust in the process. Trust that our body is an intelligent technology that is here to work with us, to assist us in clearing these traumas, so that we can fine-tune our instrument and find that tune back into oneness and wholeness, rather than playing this out of accord, right? Bring it all in. So that's essentially what I wanted to share. How do we do that? I've done so many videos. You're more than welcome to go back and just pick one that you feel guided to watch. Not just me, other light workers and humans that are on this journey that are sharing their experience with you guys. We all are sharing in this together. And I'm going to bring it back into what I was saying in the beginning. It can feel lonely and isolated, but we are not alone. But we are called to call our power back and to hold responsibility for ourselves and not put that responsibility on someone else to fit our expectations. So, what else? It's funny, I'll just share it, and on this, I pulled the other card was trust the timing. Trust the wave you came in on. Time is not running out. So what I wanted to share was in this card, there's a vision of 1, 2, 3 versions of this person standing. So there's one there, there's one there, and there's one there, which is ironic considering the picture that I drew. Recognizing that all of these, right, we can draw that back into oneness, and recognizing that this ocean, right, is one. And the ripples that we're feeling are not separate, but we don't have to feel every little ripple, by the way. We can not let every little ripple create a schism, create a separation, create, what I'm being guided to end on is some people are feeling really on edge right now, edgy, on edge. That person's talking about me. Why do I feel this way? That's part of that. Take a deep breath in, let it all go. And maybe they are talking about you. Oh, well, right? Being comfortable in our own skin is, I think, one of the biggest messages right now. So I could talk about a lot more, but I'm running out of time. So for now, I'm running out of time for this particular video in this particular moment. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope someone found this helpful. And in love and light, guys. Namaste.